is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of Global Business Africa. In the course of the hour, we'll run through the business news stories you need to know about on the continent and beyond. But first, a quick update on the markets. Now, if investors are feeling a bit jittery about Safaricom being part of the consortium that's bidding for an operating license in Ethiopia, they're certainly not showing it at the moment. The firm shares are up about 13% so far in the year. They're within 50 Kenyan shilling cents, that is, of the record high of about 39 shillings 50 cents a share. MTN, which put in the other bid for an operating license in Ethiopia, closed about 0.9% lower, but its shares in Joburg are up 50% so far in the year. We'll have an update a little later in the hour from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. But first, let's start the hour in the world of commodities. The French energy giant Total has suspended operations at a site exploring a major offshore gas field in northern Mozambique, just weeks after Islamist militants attacked a nearby town. Now, the company is saying that it is withdrawing all staff because of the evolving security situation there. Dozens of people have been killed in the March raid on the town of Palma. Total's $20 billion gas liquefaction plant, on paper, is the largest foreign investment on the continent. Its Fungi site is near Palma, which has been repeatedly attacked by militants who are linked to the Islamic State group. The four-year insurgency in Cabo Delgado has left more than 2,500 people dead, 700,000 more have been displaced. Mozambique's President Felipe Nyusi has promised to restore peace in the restive Cabo Delgado province. MTN Group and a consortium led by Vodafone plc have put in their bids for telecommunication licenses in Ethiopia. Earlier on Monday, Kenya's largest telecommunications provider, Safaricom, said it was also bidding for one license as part of a consortium with Vodafone and the UK carrier's South African unit Vodacom Group. Ethiopia, which is Africa's most populated nation after Nigeria, is poised to grow by around 8.7%. On paper, that makes it the fastest growing economy on the continent, and that's despite the country dealing with multiple crises, including a civil conflict in the northern Tigray region, which is threatening Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's economic transformation plan. With a population of more than 110 million people and only 50.7 million mobile subscribers, Ethiopia is widely seen as one of the world's last major untapped mobile markets. Let's move on to Nigeria. The manufacturing sector there is still struggling more than a year after the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The latest sector report from the country's central bank shows that the manufacturing PMI for January 2021 fell by 4.7 points to 44.9 index points. That's down from 49.6 index points reported in December 2020. And that's despite the CBN stimulus specifically aimed at manufacturers. Here's CGTN's Deja Badmus with the outlook for the sector.
With the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic last year, the Central Bank of Nigeria announced a $3.27 billion stimulus for the country's manufacturing sector. The central bank governor recently announced that at least 30% of the fund has been disbursed to 76 manufacturing firms in the country. But the decline in the manufacturing sector for the month of January does not suggest the impact of the fund is being felt in the industry. At least not for this textile manufacturer in Lagos, who says he's yet to access the fund.
Honestly, things are very tough, and nobody can predict that it's going to survive it. Well, what we are trying to do is to try to add more courage to stay afloat. But stay afloat, producing without customers coming, because there's no circulation of currency, of money.
With demand also plummeting, Adebayo's textile factory has not been fully operational since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in the country. It's a similar story for most domestic manufacturers, and added to the problem of low demand is access to raw materials.
It's very difficult for manufacturers to get forex to source their raw materials. And when you are going to get it, you get it mostly from the black market because you can't get supply from the central bank and from the regular banks. And even when you export, you are not able to use your proceeds that are in foreign exchange directly. It will have to go through the central bank, and you receive the naira, so-called naira equivalent at the CBN rate, which does not bear any relevance to what is happening in the market.
Nigeria is facing a severe forex shortage as a result of a drastic drop in government revenue from oil sales, which accounts for about 90% of the country's forex earnings. In addition to the perennial problem of infrastructure, these challenges are combining to depress local manufacturing and mainly account for the drop in the Purchasing Manager Index in January.
We have applied to the CBN, please bail us, because we don't want to close that. If you close that, you know how many people, if you sack one person today, you sack 10 people. The husband, the wife, the children, and the people surrounding them. Nobody is even fighting for profit now. We are only struggling to maintain our workers.
The central bank has said it will continue to support local manufacturing to help it bounce back. And with only 30% of its stimulus package disbursed so far, it's still got about $1.8 billion left to disburse. Perhaps it's only a matter of time before manufacturers like Adebayo benefit from the stimulus and get his factory to begin to run at full steam. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Still on manufacturing, but this time from a different perspective. The inaugural BRICS Manufacturing Conference took place recently in Johannesburg, South Africa. It's aimed at helping South African manufacturers to take advantage of the country's membership of the BRICS bloc so that their businesses can grow. Here's Angela Coppola with the details.
The South African Manufacturing Working Group, organisers of the event, encourage cooperation on projects where there is potential for collaboration across the 5 countries, and by raising awareness about opportunities in BRICS markets. And that's to tackle the dwindling contribution of the sector to GDP.
Remember, if you look at the 1994 figures, we're slightly above 20% in terms of contribution towards GDP. And that has dropped significantly from around 20% all the way to 12%. And that's worrying. Do we have the market for manufacturing in South Africa at this stage? I think at this stage I can say it's currently dropping because of our overall performance of the economy. So we need to look at export opportunities to grow our market.
Identifying those viable opportunities to grow market share and discover new markets is key to that growth.
The Clarita project, for example, is one we showcased just before lockdown in end of 2018. And there we're looking at possible licensing arrangements with other BRICS partner countries to leverage the IP that we own and to create the solution that goes across BRICS countries and then into the rest of the continent.
Most African countries still export unprocessed materials. This has to change, analysts say.
So there's an opportunity for us to take lessons and grow our share of manufactured goods that we export to those economies. Every percentage point would count not only in jobs, but also in the economic impact for South Africa.
Some would say South Africa's manufacturing sector is in a sunset phase. Others see this as an opportunity to grow it back to what it was in the 1990s. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
All right, and let's get back to our lead story, essentially the bidding process for operating licenses in arguably one of the last closed-off markets for telecommunication services in the world, Ethiopia. It's a country of at least 110 million people, but just 50.7 million subscribers. 2 key bids coming through, one from NTN and one from a consortium led by Vodafone. So what's the latest on that? Let's find out. Coletta Njohi joins us from the Ethiopian capital with the latest on this. So, Coletta, will the winners of the bid, will they have to apply separately for a mobile money service license? And when is Ethio Telecom due to roll out its own mobile money service?
Well, Rama, maybe I start with the issue of Telecom. Ethio Telecom, it's just announced about Telebir, which is going to be its mobile money services, and it says in a few weeks' time it should have that up and running. But no, the new entrants will not be allowed for now to apply for mobile money services because that is restricted to Ethiopia, to Ethiopians and probably the Ethiopians in diaspora. That's why we're having Ethio Telecom taking that much earlier and running on with it. However, there might be, and I'm using the word might, and like they say, the devil is in the details. When we see the contract that will be given to the new entrant that is supposed to join Ethio Telecom with a 40% stake, probably that one might be allowed to enjoy the rights and privileges that Ethio Telecom has, and that comes with the mobile money. But for the two international licenses that will be offered, no, not for now.
Okay, so mobile money, though, is a huge part of Safaricom's business model. In that company's case, it accounts for over 30% of its revenues in its last half-year numbers. It's an increasingly important part of telecommunication business in frontier markets. So what's the government's reason for saying no foreign entrants can come into this sector?
Well, I think for a long time it has been about security. The country has been looking at it as a security for its own financial sector, and it's more of a policy issue, right? So it said there are areas that, for example, in the past years, we saw some areas that the government said foreigners would come in, maybe manufacturing and all that, but not the financial sector, not the banking sector, where probably mobile money would fall in. That is still, locked up to the Ethiopians, still locked to the local investors. But now with the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government, we are seeing him opening up and saying financial reforms, but he has not given priority yet to the banking sector, and that's why we're still having foreigners being locked out of issues to do with mobile money, because that falls under the under the banking sector. However, Rama, we're going to have, Ethiopia says in about 2 years or so, it's going to have the financial reforms program, and this will be looking at the financial sector, what sectors or what areas in the sectors need to be opened up or to be loosened a bit, and much more. There is a high probability that we shall see then, if we have new entrants in terms of the banking sector from foreigners, then maybe that will also touch and give privilege on mobile money services to them.
And, of course, opening up the banking sector is another huge story in Ethiopia. One last question for you, Coletta. So other than this bid process for an operating license, 45% of Ethio Telecom is also due to be sold to foreign parties. What's the latest on that process?
Well, as of now, we have the transactions advisor who's in charge of that. That is, according to the Minister of Finance, they say the transaction advisor is like mopping up the final details in terms of the transactions documents as well as the financial documents for what would be the new entrants or before they put out the bid. And this is being done under a committee, a stable committee that is being led by the current State Minister of Finance, Eyob Tolina. And a part of the committee, we have different stakeholders and experts who are interested or who are more knowledgeable on the issue of privatization. And Ethio Telecom itself also has its own representatives there, the technical bit. So that's what they're doing now. Maybe in a few weeks' time, maybe a week or two, we shall see the government now announcing for people who, issues or requirements of people who should be able to, or companies or entities that will be willing to express interest. And that then we shall see the whole process, bidding. And the government says, the Minister of Finance says it is still stuck on its very ambitious agenda of, target of having a new entrant joining Ethio Telecom by at least August of this year. So
Indeed.
The process is still ongoing, but soon to be completed.
Right, we'll leave it there for the time being. Coletta Njoki there live in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Time now for a run through some company news. Let's start in the world of carbon, another kind of carbon you're talking about. Botswana Diamond Company is going to be spending nearly $6 billion building the world's largest underground diamond mine in Botswana. The mine is already the richest by value as far as the number and the quantity of precious stones it's produced over the years. The underground mine will have more than 360 kilometers of tunnel development. It should hit full production by 2034, according to the Botswana management. The underground mine will have a capacity of producing as much as 9 million carats of diamonds a year, extending its lifespan by at least 20 years. In aviation, Kenya Airways has signed up to a 2-year codeshare agreement with Congo Airways. It's a move that seeks to create additional connectivity to the two airlines' networks. The agreement now enables KQ customers to get access to Kinshasa directly from Nairobi and to fly African and international routes jointly. The deal will also see the two airlines partner in other areas of mutual interest, including aircraft maintenance, training, and sharing of excess capacity. Some M&A news. Nestle is in discussions to buy the nutritional supplement maker, the Bountiful Company. The Swiss food giant is moving further and further into health and nutrition, which is growing a lot faster than its packaged food business. Analysts say they expect a price tag of anywhere between $5 to $7 billion for Bountiful, which makes Nature's Bounty vitamins, Osteobiflex joint care supplements, and Puritan's Pride vitamins and supplements. But Nestle management have given no indication of a price in their statements so far. And finally, in pharmaceuticals, the European Commission has rolled out legal action against AstraZeneca, accusing it of not respecting the contract for the supply of COVID-19 vaccines and of not having a reliable plan to ensure timely deliveries. Under the contract, the company had committed to making, in its words, best reasonable efforts to deliver 180 million vaccine doses to the EU in the second quarter of this year, out of a total of 300 million in the period from December to June. But on the 12th of March, it had said it would aim to deliver just a third of that. That's the run through your company headlines. You're watching Global Business Africa. Time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. There's a new man in charge of the East African Community Trade Bloc, but what is at the top of his agenda? And we'll start an in-depth series on the impact of COVID-19 on economies across Africa.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Naidoo. Hello, Naro.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Welcome back to the program. Let's focus on East Africa collectively as a region. Industry captains of here have expressed their confidence in the incoming East African Community Secretary General, Dr. Peter Mathuki. They want the Kenyan national to put in place policy mechanisms that will spur the growth of intra-EAC trade to make it over 30% of the total volume. Dr. Mathuki begins his term in office at the bloc's headquarters in Arusha, Tanzania, as the 6th Secretary General of the EAC trade bloc. He takes over from Ambassador Liberato Mfumukeko from Burundi, whose 5-year non-renewable term just came to a close. Until his appointment as a new EAC boss during the February 27th Summit of Heads of State, Dr. Mathuki was Executive Director of the East African Business Council. All right then, so we know exactly who's now in charge of the East African Community Trade Bloc, but what exactly is on his agenda? Let's find out. Dr. Mathuki joins us now live from Arusha, Tanzania. So, Dr. Mathuki, good to have you on the program. Before this appointment, every time we spoke, it was in your capacity as the CEO of the East African Business Council. But now you're on the other side of the fence. What's your top priority?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me this evening. And indeed, it's my first day in office today. And it's also the Union Day in United Republic of Tanzania. So we wish them, best in the Union Day. They remind us of the need to strengthen our integration. But coming to your question, it's very important that we know the region is being adversely affected by the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic. So I think it's important that we see how to collectively, in a very coordinated manner as a region, to respond to COVID-19 and see how we can help economies of our partner states in the EAC recover and get into business. I think it's important that we consult with other partner states and come out with an approach that will be comfortable with other partner states, but all get towards a quick recovery for our economies and, of course, the health affecting people. Secondly, it's important that we look at how do we have a very systematic support for businesses, particularly the SMEs, so that they don't get completely off the radar and get into running into businesses. So support and economic recovery, not only generally, but also specific to SMEs. This is very important, particularly the cross-border traders who have been unable now to move from one side to the other because of the cross-border restrictions and so forth when you come to movement of goods.
I'm sure we'll get to the taxes bit in just a moment. But when it comes to the common external tariff, because that seems like one place where we could use an agreed-to tax policy to spur regional trade, where does the CET come in as a means of spurring that regional trade that you're talking about?
And that was my next point. I was saying it's important that we see how common external tariff we could be expedited and finalize it, possibly by close of this year. I think this is something that businesses and even partner states are keen to finalize. And that is again on top in the list that we need to now bring together other partner states, but also businesses to ensure that, yes, we finalize this. And there's a way of promoting the regional or local, for that matter, industries within East Africa.
Okay, so the CFTA, of course, is also a key story as far as Africa is concerned this particular year. But we continue to see wrangles, even within the EAC trade bloc itself, between, say, Kenya and Uganda. There have been a huge argument there about daily imports from Uganda across the border into Kenya. But if countries are still wrangling over simple things like this, how can the CFTA feasibly work?
It will work because we have to approach the CFTA within the framework of the East African community. And for that matter, it's important that we put some very basics in place. And some of these basics are to do with the standards. Because again, we have common standards within the region and standards that are acceptable across. And these are systems we want to put in place. And again, it's important that we create more awareness on the bigger picture on CFTA and what benefits are likely to come from CFTA, and see how each one of the, everyone within the region can benefit. And of course, try to build more capacities within our partner states so that we don't get into some of the things of push and pull that may not have a very long-term, economic impact. So I think it's about putting systems in place that supports very common standards within the region.
Well, standards are certainly one side of the equation, but given how long it took to actually have this row between Kenya and Uganda sorted out, and it was sorted out more or less at a government-to-government level, do you think there's a need to improve dispute resolution mechanisms within the EAC bloc as well?
Yeah. Already we have what we call the trade disputes remedy committees in place, and that is something that has not really been naturalized so far. And this is very important. That's why you see now partner states are resorting to bilateral engagements, which is also fine because that is within the framework of the East African community. In fact, when you look at the treaty establishing the East African community, it talks of this kind of engagement where partner states, for one reason or the other, they could engage and see how to resolve some of these things. But importantly, we need to have a mechanism, and that mechanism is a trade disputes resolution, committees that we need now to have them in place and functioning, and also make sure that businesses and citizens have confidence in these mechanisms, so that when disputes arise, we can easily resolve them without necessarily having to take so long without being resolved. But again, for whatever disputes that are happening, the East African community as a secretariat is a key to ensure that they are at the center of it, so that they can become now the factor that brings all these factors together and make sure that we use the expertise that we have, we use the technology that we have to ensure these disputes are resolved.
All right.
But
One last question for you, Dr. Maduki, very, very quickly. Public finances across the trade bloc, of course, as you mentioned earlier, have been battered by the COVID-19 pandemic, and governments here are fairly keen on raising taxes as one way of bridging their fiscal deficits. But given the things that you've mentioned, you need to spur SME growth, you need to spur regional trade as well. Are there specific tax policies that you're lobbying for now that we're essentially in budget season in Dar, in Kampala, in Nairobi and in Kigali?
Yeah, one of the things we've been advocating for, and I think this is an opportune time to see how it can work, is avoidance of double taxation. And this avoidance of double taxation, if it can be applied across all the partner states, that is going to ease the cost of doing business. And two, it will also be able to support to ensure that the prices are not so high. And that is something we want to push, so that we create more awareness to some of the partner states that are yet to ratify, but make sure that we all ratify and make sure that we move in the same direction. But again, the CET comes under this. And this is something that I spoken earlier. But again, ensuring that the spread of the tax base, so that is across almost sectors, so that we don't overtax some of the sectors. But finally, make sure that whatever policy that we put, we protect the SMEs, because SMEs, of course, cover a big chunk of our economies in the region.
Indeed, they do account for the bulk of employment and job creation. Dr. Peter Maduki, on your first day in office as Secretary General of the East African Community, thank you very much for your time. Now then, let's head up north. The Aqaba Gulf, or the Gulf of Aqaba if you prefer, it's a meeting point of 4 different countries: Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Israel. The Gulf has been growing in recent years. It's becoming an interesting business area. And that's everything from Saudi Arabia's new attraction, the city of Neom that they're building over there, to oil exploration points. Here's CGTN's Adel Mahrouki now exploring some of the other multi-billion-dollar joint projects that are underway in the Gulf of Aqaba.
The Egyptian Sinai has been the focal point of the government's economic development plan. It is building a $3.3 billion customs-free zone. The peninsula stands between the Gulf of Aqaba and Suez, which makes it the connector between Asia and Africa.
Egypt hasn't yet utilized the Sinai to its potential. The Egyptian government is investing some $40 billion in it. Sinai is rich in resources. There's a huge potential in mining, agriculture and tourism, which makes it a promising industrial zone. There's a plan to inhabit some 9 million people there. It is in the center of regional economic zones, and Sinai could one day be the main driver of the Egyptian economy.
The Gulf of Aqaba gives Egypt an international outreach to Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Israel. This branch of the Red Sea is witnessing outstanding development. Saudi Arabia is building a new city called Neom, a $500 billion project.
When I visited Neom, I realized the importance of Aqaba, which will include such a strategic project. Neom will be a business driver to all countries in the region due to the diverse scope of businesses there. Aqaba is a vital passage for Egyptian labor in the Gulf. Also, Egyptian products get exported via trucks to Saudi Arabia, Gulf countries and Iraq.
Egypt and Jordan are working on a massive project that will extend an oil pipeline from Iraq to Egypt, where Iraqi oil will get refined here. The pipe will go through Aqaba, where Jordan has its special economic zone. The project has so far attracted $10 billion worth of investments and joins Israel with Saudi Arabia.
Israel's inclusion is inevitable if Arab countries want to enter some industries which Israel excels at, like information technology and electronic chips. Aqaba has the potential to establish a tech valley if such partnership happens. Our region will benefit a lot.
Aqaba's now reached a status that makes it an international tourist attraction, an important stop for global maritime trade routes as it connects Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Gulf countries and Iraq. Aqaba is approaching an important turn point to become a vital and strategic region globally.
The key to unleashing all this potential is stability in the Middle East. That could open a door for an official normalization of ties between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Once resolved, Aqaba's development can proceed in full throttle. The Aqaba region is becoming a magnet for international investments and quickly growing to be a vital business link between Asia and Africa through Egypt. Compared to its potential, the magnitude of development so far reached makes it still a virgin business zone. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Somalia's economy is forecast to recover to grow by at least 2.9% this year and 3.2% in 2022, after, of course, the pandemic-induced slump. Somalia's real GDP growth was comparable in 2019, about 2.9%, but it contracted by 1.5% last year. Apart from the pandemic, however, the Horn of Africa economy has been battered by a whole range of other problems. Severe flooding last year and, of course, a widespread infestation of desert locusts. Growth has been affected by reduced FDI as investors shied away from the country due to contentious elections that are still on hold. CGTN spoke to the Director General of Somalia's Finance Ministry a little earlier. Suleiman Omar highlighted the country's current economic situation and the work they're doing to try and revive the economy from the damage inflicted by the pandemic.
The ministry tried to take steps. The first the first step that we took was that we assessed the severity of the shock, economic shock that has been hit to the country. After an assessment, we come up a plan that we can at least how we can reduce at least and how can effectively we address the shocks, especially the COVID-19, which was new to even to the world. We try to at least by the time that we make an assessment, when the lockdown already started, we come up at least to reduce the amount of tax on commodities, especially the items that essential is for the life of the society. We are optimistic in recovering 2021, 2022. And then is the development of the COVID vaccine. We think that the economy will at least revive, and we are optimistic that when the pandemic is lifted over, then the economy will be reviving. And we still keeping our economic reforms.
Now, at least the better part of a year has passed since the first cases of COVID-19 were reported across the continent. To date, available data shows that roughly 3% or so of the population has contracted the virus. But the heavy impact will be on the economy. The International Monetary Fund, in its latest assessment of sub-Saharan Africa, says the region will be the one that registers the slowest growth this year. Starting tonight, we'll be running a range of special reports looking at the impact this pandemic has had on Africa's key economic drivers. We start off in Zimbabwe. When the pandemic hit, it exposed the health sector that just didn't have enough hospital beds or personal protective equipment, and whose workforce was demoralized, grumbling about back pay that goes back years. 12 months later, though, Zimbabwe has managed to see out 2 waves of the pandemic. The Southern African nation launched its vaccination campaign on the 18th of February. It's targeting to inoculate at least 10 million of its 16 million citizens in order to get closer to herd immunity. From Harare, here's CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya.
Despite some glaring inadequacies, Zimbabwe managed to redirect funds and call on assistance from partners like China to ready facilities to handle the COVID-19 pandemic.
On the positive side, there was quite a bit of, there was some infrastructure development which took place nationwide. I think the most important being bulk oxygen delivery. A lot of hospitals, especially outside major cities, and even some provincial hospitals didn't have bulk oxygen. And as you know, really the main therapy for COVID is already oxygen. And so a lot of hospitals had that kind of infrastructure development and some infrastructure refurbishments and upgrades. But as you know, we're coming from quite a deficit. That was a welcome development.
Doctors and nurses who had been on a protracted strike returned to the wards, although some of their grievances remained unsolved.
There was a marked improvement in terms of salaries, and other conditions of service were improved. As government, we will continue to support them and do our best to make sure that everyone is happy and provided for as much as we can. But the most important thing is that now everyone understands that some things cannot be done overnight.
The challenges stem from inadequate budget support.
So our facilities, our healthcare workers and so on, they are quite clearly struggling, a bit stretched. But as usual, when we identify a challenge, we jump in and relook, rethink and see what is it that we can do. For ourselves here, we've decided we obviously need to strengthen what's happening in our hospitals, but at the same time, we are pushing and strengthening that prevention aspect.
Following the arrival of the vaccine, Zimbabwe is now in a race to inoculate about 60% of its population in order to achieve herd immunity.
But even with the pandemic subdued, the country is still saddled with other burdens whose impact has been underscored by the coronavirus.
As a ministry, we found that this disease can make things worse, especially for our people with underlying diseases like diabetes, hypertension, asthma, cancer. What it has taught us is that we need to continue really invigorating our energies to manage the NCDs. The NCDs are the non-communicable diseases. We learned that we cannot leave them behind.
Zimbabwe has seen an increased prevalence of non-communicable diseases in recent years, which has strained the health sector. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
On to South Africa now, where the country's President Cyril Ramaphosa instituted a hard lockdown on the 27th of March last year. From Johannesburg, CGTN's Sumitra Naidu reflects on what the past year has been like for Africa's most industrialized economy.
Cleaner air, better hygiene and reduced crime may have been the unintended consequences of the national lockdown announced in March last year. But South Africa watched with the rest of the world as the lives of millions changed forever. South Africa's world-renowned team of scientists and specialists in communicable diseases like TB and HIV/AIDS helped provide a fairly quick response.
I think we've got some of the best scientists in the world. I think our scientists learn a lot during the HIV era, and all those knowledge that they have attributed during those times are now being used very well in this pandemic. If there's one thing that we have learned from this COVID-19, is that we've got excellent people, excellent. And there's a lot of goodwill.
A $33 billion relief package was made available, but the lockdowns were severe.
It's all about resources. I don't think it's always fair against some of these third world countries. But in truth, South Africa is a third world country.
The challenges of a sluggish economy and poor fiscal health even before the pandemic put South Africa in a difficult position at the onset of this global crisis. The South African economy emerged battered and bruised, recording a 7% decline in GDP for 2020. It's the worst contraction in this country's history. Disinformation and fake news around 5G technology, safety measures and vaccinations remain a threat to herd immunity.
A lot of vaccine hesitancy in this country also draws on historical stigmas about HIV and on people's long-standing anxieties about viruses in this country. The fact that we had a political establishment when that virus popped up that refused to acknowledge that it was a legitimate problem, and the stigma around it is still enormous and real.
Since March 2020, South Africa has moved between 5 different levels of lockdown, each imposing differing limitations to movement and economic activity.
It is very hard because the job, our children is not working now.
Since lockdown started last year, it was a little bit hard, but we're here coping with it.
Over 1.5 million people have been infected, while 3 million people lost their jobs in the first month of the total shutdown. The devastation of COVID-19 will be felt for many years to come. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, that certainly is the broad overview, but we'll continue these series of stories throughout the week. Tomorrow we'll be focusing on supply chains and how those buckled, broke and essentially had to be redone from the ground up in the face of the COVID-19 pandemic. All that and more in tomorrow's edition of Global Business. For now, time for a short break. Here's what's coming up next. Car makers in Japan exploring changes in the approach to manufacturing as a global chip shortage continues to bite. And live streaming video games is taking off in China. The details coming up shortly. Taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Welcome back to the program. Let's run through some of the stories making your headlines at this hour. Starting in Nigeria. Insurgents in the northeastern end of the country have reportedly killed about 30 soldiers. In the meantime, kidnappers have also attacked a university in northern Nigeria. They've abducted several students. The West African nation has seen a spike in insecurity in some parts of the country in recent months. Over in Chad, the military council has appointed Albert Pahemi Badake as the prime minister. This comes after the death of the country's long-serving president, Idris Deby. He succumbed to injuries sustained during a frontline confrontation with rebels. Badake's appointment has been challenged by opposition members who still call the formation of this military council as a coup d'etat. Badake has served in the same docket before. Between 2016 and 2018, he was an ally of the former president who was in charge of Chad for 3 decades. India recorded a new global high for daily COVID cases for the 5th day in a row, with new 352,991 cases. Hospitals in Delhi and many other cities have run out of bed space, and people have been forced to find ways to get treatment for sick patients at home. Many have turned to the black market, where prices of essential medicines, oxygen cylinders and concentrators have shot up, and questionable drugs are now proliferating as well. And finally, the World Health Organization is reviewing 2 coronavirus vaccines made in China for emergency use licensing. Vaccine candidates from Sinopharm and Sinovac Biotech are now in the final stages of the WHO's emergency use list review process. A final decision is expected this week. If approved, these vaccines will become part of the COVAX facility. This is a WHO-led initiative aimed at providing equal access to vaccines for low and middle-income economies. That's a run through your headlines. A global chip shortage is forcing many companies to rethink their operations. In Japan, car makers are actually stopping production at several plants due to a lack of parts. Some now are looking to change their entire approach to manufacturing. Phoebe Amoroso reports from Tokyo.
Tokyo-headquartered Corestaff is one of Japan's largest distributors of electronic components, specializing in the import and export of semiconductors. The global shortage has seen customers rush to buy up stock. Corestaff sales have jumped 70% compared to last year.
In a panic like this, customers always order double or triple quantities. In order to hedge risk, there's temporary demand.
The company sells all kinds of electronic parts online, including parts for cars. From October last year, they began to notice supplies took a lot longer to be delivered. The company's CEO put the shortage down to the US-China trade war, followed by the coronavirus pandemic disrupting the supply chain and initially causing a dip in demand.
As society started to get back to normal, the demand, not only from Japan but also worldwide, gradually went up again. So while chip manufacturers were lowering their capacity, the demand suddenly increased.
But while it has been good news for semiconductor traders, the shortage is putting Japan's auto industry in a tight spot. In February, production levels at Honda and Subaru fell by more than 1/3 compared to the same period a year ago. Then in March, a fire at a plant belonging to Japanese chipmaker Renesas added to the pressure.
The industry is moving towards EVs, which require many more chips. Experts say that this trend, alongside the current shortage, is making many manufacturers question the practices that have made them successful in the past.
When it comes to Toyota's production style, they use the just-in-time system, in which they have the materials ready at the necessary locations at the necessary time. It's now possible that this will no longer be their strength in the future.
Toyota has already been racing ahead. The car maker has begun stockpiling chips and revealed in February it had a 4-month stockpile. There's a bigger focus now on resiliency over efficiency.
The shortage made us all realize how important the chip is in the industry today, and it will only increase in significance as the shift to EV progresses.
And car makers that can't work out how to maintain supplies could find themselves stuck in a jam. Phoebe Amoroso, CGTN, Tokyo.
The tech firm Huawei has wrapped up its annual developer conference in Shenzhen, unveiling 6 breakthroughs in the world of cloud computing. Now, that particular event, Richard Yu, the CEO of Huawei's Cloud and Consumer Business Group, said that Huawei's future will primarily revolve around its cloud and its computing tech. Huawei will also be investing another $220 million in its Fertile Soil Plan. That's an open-sourced developer program.
We are building a comprehensive industrial ecosystem, from open-sourced hardware to open-sourced software. They could be applied by governments, telecom operators, transportation, and energy supplies. The ecosystem could meet the increasingly diversified demand for computing. We hope all developers can join us to help facilitate a more diversified computing industry, as well as artificial intelligence.
Now, at a time when more and more of us are either working remotely or spending a lot more time at home, people are just streaming a lot more content on TV, not just TV shows and movies. Live video streams of video games are also rising in popularity. On What's Hot Tonight, CGTN's Lu Sirui takes you to China, where fans are welcoming this tech due to its convenience, ease of access, and low entry costs.
The gaming habits of China's younger generation are changing. They now like to play games on their phones in shorter bursts, and new technology is allowing them to stream high-quality graphics and smooth gameplay.
I like streaming games because it doesn't take up a lot of storage on my phone. I also like the games can be picked up on other devices and continued from the place I stopped.
Computers or consoles with top specifications have traditionally been needed to install and run the latest games. But in recent years, mobile technology has started to catch up. Advances mean streaming top-quality games is now possible through cloud computing technology. This also allows players to enjoy the games across different devices. Tencent Xianyou, a cloud game platform of Chinese gaming giant Tencent, says they're eyeing on further development.
To further develop the industry, we need to improve sectors on the chain as a whole, including stronger cloud computing capacity and faster bandwidth. We also want to develop more games in the streaming category and combine live streams with game streaming.
Data from market research company iMedia predicts the number of Chinese players of streaming games in 2023 will reach over 600 million. They predict the size of the market will reach around 100 billion yuan.
It's difficult to further improve the performance of the server under existing circumstances, but 5G technology can help with the breakthrough. Generally speaking, in terms of playing games, the internet speed should reach 1 megabytes per second. 5G technology increases it to 100 megabytes per second. In the future, I think cloud gamers may also want an immersive 3D experience. 5G can also provide the basis for that.
The leading companies say that game streaming services in China will be developed in line with the features of new phones. Lu Sirui, CGTN, Guangdong Province.
Now, at the start of the hour, we spoke about Total freezing its investments in offshore gas fields in Mozambique. So let's jump into commodity prices for a minute here. The firm's shares, at least as far as their trading in Paris is concerned, they've gone up by about 4.4% so far in the year. And that's a lot less compared to its peers like Royal Dutch Shell, ExxonMobil and BP. In fact, all of those are up 8.8%, 36% and 16.4% higher, respectively, over the same period of time. Coffee C futures also hit a fresh high for the year, $143, up 3.25% just before 16:30 GMT. Today, Starbucks is reporting second quarter results in the next 24 hours. It's going to be interesting to see what the market makes of those numbers as a rough proxy, if you will, for where consumer demand is, especially in the United States and in China. Here's what's coming up next. We'll explore innovation in Tanzania, specifically in the power sector, when we come back. Welcome back to the program. One of Tanzania's formal goals is to elevate the East African economy from its current middle-income status. The government plans to do that through industrialization, and that in turn has created enormous demand for electricity. Tonight, we'll bring the story of one inventor that's trying to meet the country's growing energy needs with his offering in electricity generation. With that report, here's Isaac Lucando on Grassroots.
This workshop might be mistaken for a junkyard, but what comes out of it is enlightening. The strange-looking gadgets strewn across the room conceal an electricity generator that may revolutionize electricity generation in Tanzania. Roger Msuya, its 52-year-old inventor, says what's unique about the generator is that it uses magnets to generate electricity.
I am an expert in water pumps and electricity generating machines, but the difference is that the generators I make don't use fuel, they use free energy. So I've been researching on getting energy without using energy.
The idea of a free energy generator, or generating power from a never-ending source like a magnet, is not a new one. What got the government interested in Msuya's invention is his ability to make easy-to-use units that generate up to 155 kilovolts of electricity that can even power a street.
An expert from the government confirmed that the magnets can indeed generate electricity. Other experts went on to satisfactorily measure the amount of electricity generated and saw that by using this technology, it is possible to generate large amounts of electricity that could be entered into the national grid.
Earlier this year, the Ministry of Energy formally recognized Msuya and his invention, and is now looking at ways to partner with him. With a total of 1,600 megawatts of electricity currently being generated in the country, the government wants to add on other sources of electricity in addition to hydropower, solar, geothermal, and wind power that are already in use. According to the government, Tanzania's long-term plans are to increase the country's electricity capacity to 10,000 megawatts from various sources by 2025. The government sees the inventions of people like Roger Msuya as key to reaching this goal. With only a primary school education, Msuya's success has been fueled by an intense love of electrical engineering. Having once made a helicopter that actually worked, he says his main challenge is accessing capital to realize all the ideas he has.
Any money I get, however little, I invest in these projects. I might have some money in my mobile money wallet, but I direct everything here because if you don't create, what will you have to show? If you don't research, what will you have to say?
Msuya makes a living by selling the generators he makes to whoever is interested. However, he's not yet done inventing. He says he aims to pass on his skills to the younger generation and keep providing energy solutions to light up his country and the African continent. Isaac Lukando, CGTN, Dar es Salaam.
And finally, a Kenyan startup is building UAVs that will specialize in delivering medical supplies to remote parts of the country. Swift Lab Limited, which was started by local aeronautical engineers, is expected to start production of its urban air mobility systems in the next 5 years. CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy filed this report.
After studying in China for 4 years, James Munyoki can speak Mandarin fluently. As a student of aeronautics, his main interest was to master aircraft design and use the technology back home.
The opportunity was quite good. I went in and started majoring in aircraft design because I knew all too well I wanted to come back home and create an impact.
Munyoki did just that. He came back to Kenya and founded Swift Lab, a cargo drone company, in 2013.
Chinese people are quite hospitable and they are so welcoming, and it's because of that kind of environment we went there and gained so much that we can bring home today and say we have a drone company, and someone else can come back home and say they're a doctor or they're running a construction company.
The company is currently building and operating medium-range and medium-payload unmanned aircraft. The drone uses a global navigation satellite system and can fly for up to 1 hour and 30 minutes.
This does up to 70 kilometers of range with a payload of 4 kilograms. So its wingspan is 1.9 meters, and it can take off and land vertically, which means you don't need a runway to operate this drone.
This drone, as you see it has more than 100 parts, each unique. The wing itself has like 20 to 30 parts. You cannot see it now, but yeah, believe me, there are around 30 parts in here.
The autopilot system also has the capability to enable the drone to conduct autonomous missions, meaning it can fly hands-free without using the controller full-time. Swift Lab aims to deliver critical and emergency supplies to people living in hard-to-reach areas, with the firm's mission being to improve access to healthcare and saving lives. For James Munyoki, building and piloting a drone to support humanitarian and development projects in his own country has been a lifelong dream.
We've started seeing a lot of interest in our technology, and as an engineer, I would hope to see our technology being used to make positive impacts in remote areas in different countries in Africa.
In my total life in aviation, it has always been adopting technology or buying technology in aviation from the West, from other countries outside Africa. I think this is a great encouragement to our young people.
In recent years, many African students who have studied in China have brought advanced technologies and equipment back home.
We have what it takes as Africa to build things, come up with solutions for ourselves. So if we just get the right financial support, we have the ability to become the next big thing in manufacturing.
With China-Africa relations continually deepening, Africa is witnessing more and more young people like James Munyoki contributing positively to the continent's development. Daniel Arap-Moy, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
That story on a Kenyan UAV startup wraps up this edition of Global Business Africa. As always, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the content you've seen on the program in the last hour. Many ways to get your thoughts back to us, all of them on your screens right now. I'm Ramah Nyang in the Kenyan capital, Nairobi. Thank you for your company in the last hour. The World Today is up next from Washington, D.C.